Today, we are opening up a remarkable collection of material covering, well, nearly 8 decades of history for one of the most durable animated rivalries ever created, the relentless chase that defines Tom and Jerry.
It's a franchise that has done more than just survive. I mean, it's actively evolved, adapted, and sometimes radically shifted its identity through these massive changes in technology, culture, and censorship standards.
It has.
And yet, that central, almost dialogue-free conflict remains instantly recognizable anywhere in the world.
That universality is exactly what we're here to analyze. Our mission today is not to focus on the cartoon plots themselves, though we'll certainly touch on them,
Of course.
but rather the crucial and I think surprising story behind the cartoons. We're going to look at the immense technical talent involved, the production constraints that, forced innovation, and the controversies that required physical reanimation.
And the massive cultural influence that keeps them relevant even today. To really understand their significance, you have to go back. You have to remember the context of their debut in 1940. The series began at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer MGM, and at that time, their animation department was struggling.
Really struggling.
Immensely.
Yeah.
They were just losing the box office battle to the giants of the era. You had Walt Disney Productions, which was putting out masterpieces like Pinocchio. And then you had Leon Schlesinger Productions, which was the home of the entire Looney Tunes roster.
Right.
MGM was, frankly, desperate to find a character that could compete.
And they found it almost by accident. Their very first short, Puss Gets the Boot, was an instant hit.
It was.
But what's often forgotten is that the names we know so well, they hadn't been settled yet. The cat was initially called Jasper.
And the mouse was, well, he was unnamed, though I think some studio notes called him Jinx.
Jinx, right.
And that's a crucial detail because it shows how quickly they just stumbled upon the winning formula. Even with placeholder names, the core concept was there.
The ultra-violent, sophisticated slapstick.
Yeah.
The chase.
It was all established perfectly in that first 7-minute film. And it was the critical reaction that changed everything for the studio.
Absolutely. The general manager of the animation unit, a man named Fred Quimby, had initially advised the creators against making any more cat and mouse shorts. He thought it was, too derivative.
But that opinion just evaporated when Puss Gets the Boot earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Short Subject Cartoon in 1941.
Right. And that immediately signaled to the studio brass that they had potential gold on their hands, even if the actual creators, William Hanna and Joseph Barbera, their names were initially omitted from the credits.
In favor of Quimby, of course.
Of course.
But that nomination, it forced MGM to invest properly. The first order of business was to give the duo permanent, marketable names. So the studio held an internal contest.
And an animator named John Carr won. He suggested Tom the Cat and Jerry the Mouse,
Securing the identities that would last for the next 8 decades.
And for that one suggestion, John Carr got a prize of $50. Now, $50 in 1940, that wasn't a small sum.
No, not at all. If you adjust that for inflation, it's the equivalent of over $1,100 today. It was a significant bonus for a single idea. It just shows how much confidence the studio now had.
And what's equally fascinating is how common that name already was. Tom and Jerry wasn't original to the cartoon. It was a 19th century English phrase.
A very common one. It was used to describe young men engaged in, well, riotous, often drunken living.
You're referring to Pierce Egan's book from 1821, Life in London.
Exactly. The full title was something like Life in London, or The Day and Night Scenes of Jerry Hawthorne Esquire and His Elegant Friend Corinthian Tom. That novel was huge.
So the phrase just entered the vernacular.
Immediately.
Yeah.
So by naming their characters Tom and Jerry, the creators were instantly tapping into that tradition of mayhem and, energetic conflict. The title basically means a couple of rascals causing a massive ruckus.
Which is the perfect description. So that massive commitment, it solidified their identity. But what did that actually buy them creatively? Let's look at the production of the Hanna-Barbera Golden Era, which ran from 1940 to 1958.
This period is what defined American theatrical animation for millions of people. Hanna and Barbera produced 114 shorts for MGM during this run, and they just set an almost unreachable standard for quality.
And the awards prove it. I mean, the numbers are just staggering. The Hanna-Barbera era won 7 Academy Awards for Best Animated Short Film.
7.
To put that in perspective, that accomplishment put them in a direct tie with Walt Disney's entire Silly Symphony series for the most wins in that category. This wasn't just entertainment, this was high art, recognized by Hollywood's highest institution.
It absolutely was, and the budgets reflected that. Joe Barbera estimated that the typical budget for each short was around $50,000.
Which, in today's money, is well over $500,000 for a 7-minute cartoon.
An astronomical commitment of resources. He said that budget and the time is short took roughly 6 weeks to complete. It allowed them to take time to get it right.
6 weeks for 7 minutes of animation is a huge undertaking. And what's so surprising about their artistic process, especially when you look at modern animation, is the lack of a formal written script.
That is a fundamental difference. Hanna and Barbera work almost entirely visually. Barbera was the master storyteller on paper. He would just focus intensely on drawing out the storyboards, the character designs, the animation layout.
Mapping out every single frame.
Every single one. And William Hanna, meanwhile, he was the maestro of timing and production supervision.
So how did that division of labor work in practice? If Barbera provided the blueprints, how did Hanna make sure the gags landed with perfect timing?
Hanna was the one who assigned the scenes to the animators, people like Irvin Spence or Kenneth Muse. He supervised the whole workflow, and crucially, he dictated the specific frame counts for every single action.
So he knew exactly how long a punch should take.
Exactly how many frames for a punch to connect, for a character to flatten it into a pancake, and the recovery time needed after. That precise timing is what made the humor work so well.
And Hanna also contributed one of the most recognizable sounds in cartoon history. Tom's high-pitched, leather-lunged scream of pure pain.
Yes, that ear-splitting shriek was all Hanna. He would record his own scream, and then they would use a clever sound manipulation technique. They would physically cut the recording tape, getting rid of the beginning and the end of the sound.
Leaving only the loudest, most intense part.
Exactly. It just intensified the auditory punch. He also did Jerry's nervous gulp and a lot of high-pitched laughs.
So the auditory experience was absolutely central, especially because the characters didn't really talk. Which brings us to the monumental contribution of musical director Scott Bradley.
Bradley's scores are so much more than background music. They were complex, dense compositions that were essential to the story. Because there was no dialogue, the music had to emphasize the action, provide the humor cues, and fill in the emotional gaps.
It made everything understandable.
Totally.
And the sources say his scores weren't just catchy, they are musically sophisticated. They wove together jazz, classical, and even some very serious atonal techniques.
That's the most fascinating technical detail about the Golden Era. Bradley wasn't afraid to use complex theoretical structures, including Arnold Schoenberg's 12-tone technique.
Which is not what you'd expect in a cartoon. For anyone who isn't familiar, what is that exactly?
Well, the 12-tone technique is designed to give all 12 notes of the chromatic scale equal importance. It basically prevents the music from having a traditional key, so it creates this feeling of unsettledness, atonality.
So how does that system, which is designed for high art dissonance, translate to a cat being hit with a frying pan?
It's a brilliant adaptation. Bradley used it not for sustained dissonance, but for moments of absolute panic or high tension or just sheer chaos. When Tom is falling from a building or trapped in some machine, the music needed to convey pure, structured disorder. The 12-tone row let him create these frenetic, complex patterns that sounded exactly like the visual mayhem on screen.
He was scientifically scoring the destruction.
He was. And that level of orchestration must have been incredibly challenging for the studio musicians.
I can imagine.
Absolutely. Bradley was, in effect, treating the cartoon like a miniature symphony. The musicians at MGM were top-notch, but they still reportedly struggled to perform the complex, rapid-fire sheet music he created. This deep integration of high-level music explains why the budgets were so high and why the finished products had such cinematic quality.
And over this 18-year golden era, we also see the appearance of the main characters change. Subtly, but it's noticeable. They had to age gracefully, as the sources put it.
You can trace a clear visual evolution. Early Jerry, for instance, he was slightly heavier. He had these long eyelashes. Over time, he slimmed down and lost the eyelashes.
And Tom's transformation was even more dramatic.
He went from a shaggier look to a much smoother, sleeker design. He got these prominent, larger eyebrows that help convey his frustration, and his posture gradually shifted from, a more natural four-legged cat to being almost exclusively bipedal.
Especially when he was in the middle of one of his complex schemes.
Exactly.
But this incredible run of quality, it was ultimately a victim of changing technology and economics in the 1950s.
The primary force was the dramatic rise of television. People were simply staying home, which cut theatrical revenue way down.
Yeah.
MGM tried desperately to combat this. They initiated budget cuts, And starting in 1954, they ordered the shorts to be produced in the new widescreen CinemaScope format.
Right, that was a move to lure viewers back to the big screen, emphasizing the spectacle television couldn't match yet.
Precisely. Pet Peeve was the first short released in CinemaScope. And to enhance the experience even more, later shorts had their soundtracks recorded in Perspecta directional audio.
What was that?
It was a process that let sound engineers take a single soundtrack and manipulate it to create a kind of rudimentary sense of directionality through speaker panning in the theater. It was MGM's way of trying to mimic the more advanced stereo sound systems competitors were using.
So it was an attempt to leverage technical novelty against the growing power of the home screen.
It was a sign of desperation. And unfortunately, the strategy didn't work. MGM executives discovered they were earning just as much money from re-releasing the old Hanna-Barbera shorts as they were from producing expensive new ones.
The economics just didn't justify it.
Not at all. And that realization led to the inevitable. The decision was made to completely cease production. The entire MGM animation department was closed down on May 15, 1957. The golden era came to a very abrupt end.
But this closure led directly to the birth of what would become the animation titan of the television age.
Absolutely. William Hanna and Joseph Barbera immediately left MGM to form Hanna-Barbera Productions. They were now free from the demanding constraints of theatrical budgets, and they went on to pioneer animation for television, creating a stable of characters that defined childhood for generations.
The Flintstones, Yogi Bear, Scooby-Doo.
All of them. Their legacy is literally split between two entirely different media platforms.
Before we move on from that era, though, it's critical to pause and look at the actual dynamic between Tom and Jerry, because it's so much more complex than just a simple cat and mouse formula.
It really is. What's fascinating is analyzing the structure of their rivalry. We know the action is defined by extreme, cartoonish violence axes, traps, poison, electrocution, explosions.
Slicing Tom in half sometimes.
Yes, but the motivation behind all that mayhem is rarely primal.
You mean Tom is rarely trying to actually eat Jerry?
Exactly. Tom's motivation was usually not hunger. It was far more human competition, revenge, or, most commonly, seeking a reward from his owner for just doing his job as a good house cat.
So the rivalry became a performance. And despite all the mayhem, the source material suggests the relationship had this surprising nuance.
Yes, the rivalry operated within clear parameters. On several occasions, they displayed genuine friendship or concern, setting aside their animosity to deal with a much larger, more dangerous threat from a third party.
There's a sort of conscience clause?
That's a great way to put it. When one character appeared to be in real, mortal danger from something unplanned, the other would invariably step in to save them. It confirmed they needed each other for their own purpose.
But there were exceptions, right? The sources highlight shorts with darker themes, like The Two Mouseketeers and Blue Cat Blues.
The Two Mouseketeers ends with Tom clearly being guillotined off-screen for failing to guard a feast. It's a remarkably dark ending. But Blue Cat Blues from 1956 is perhaps the most shocking example.
That one is unsettling.
It's a very mature, dark narrative about Tom's despair over a lost love. It references alcoholism, and it ends with both Tom and Jerry sitting on railroad tracks waiting for a train.
It's shocking given the target audience.
It was part of the late-era Hanna-Barbera shorts when they were experimenting with mood and complexity, maybe reflecting the anxiety around the department's closure. It really highlights the breadth of their storytelling ambitions, even within the confines of slapstick.
We mentioned that the duo rarely spoke, but those rare instances of dialogue are highly memorable.
Because speech was so minimal, its use was incredibly effective. When Tom does speak, it's usually either a song or an assumed persona. He sings a full rendition of Louis Jordan's hit, Is You Is, or Is You Ain't My Baby, in Solid Serenade.
And his persona when wooing female cats was often a specific vocal style.
He'd use this deep, rolling, French-accented voice designed to imitate the popular French actor of the 1940s, Charles Boyer. It was another sign of sophistication. They were referencing contemporary Hollywood culture the parents in the audience would get.
And there's that one line, often muttered by a completely battered Tom, which became a running joke.
Don't you believe it?
Right.
That was a reference to a popular radio show from the 1940s. It functions as this meta-joke, reinforcing the chaotic, self-aware nature of their endless conflict.
So beyond the central duo, let's explore the recurring supporting cast. They were essential for widening the scope of the conflict.
They introduced different rules and dimensions to the chase. The first major one is Spike the Bulldog. He originally appeared as this mute, indiscriminate brute. Later, he gained a very distinctive voice, modeled after the comedian Jimmy Durante.
And Spike's role evolved. He often served as an accidental protector of Jerry. The plot would involve him giving Tom a strict warning.
Usually threatening that if Tom interrupted his activity sleeping, building a doghouse, Spike would do something horrible to him.
Which Jerry would inevitably exploit.
Of course. Jerry would use Spike's warning as a lever, manipulating Tom into breaking the rule, knowing Spike's rage would be directed at the cat. That's where Spike's famous catchphrase comes from. Listen, pussycat.
And that's my boy, when referring to his son Tyke.
Right. Tyke was the cute, lovable puppy. In the original shorts, he only barked and yapped. He wouldn't actually get a speaking voice until the Tom and Jerry Kids series in the 90s.
Then we have Butch, the tough guy.
Butch is the classic black, cigar-smoking alley cat. Tom's most frequent rival, often competing for female cats like Toodles galore. He was also the leader of Tom's alley cat friends, Lightning, Topsy, and Meathead.
And finally, Nibbles, or Tuffy, Jerry's little ally.
Nibbles is introduced as a small, gray orphan mouse, often seen as Jerry's apprentice, and he speaks with this high-pitched French accent. The key to his dynamic is his innocence. He often succeeds where Jerry fails because he's so straightforward.
Like just asking Tom for the cheese.
Exactly. He just walks up and asks Tom to hand it to him, and Tom is so confused he actually does it.
The Hanna-Barbera era ended in 1958, but the franchise was far too valuable to just disappear. So MGM decided to revive the shorts in the early 60s, leading to a period of radical aesthetic shifts.
And this brings us into the controversial Gene Deitch era from 1961 to 1962. This is a purely mercenary decision. MGM contracted the work out to Rembrandt Films in Prague, Czechoslovakia.
Behind the Iron Curtain.
Behind the Iron Curtain. And this introduced massive constraints, especially budgetary ones. Only 13 shorts were produced, and the budget was exceptionally tight. Deitch was given only $10,000 per short.
Compared to the $50,000 Hanna and Barbera had.
Right, and this immediately dictated the quality and style. Deitch himself was not a fan of the original's violence, but he did come to see the conflict as a parody of exaggerated human emotions.
Like David and Goliath.
He literally described it that way. But despite his appreciation, the resulting shorts were different, visually and orally distinct. The animation was very limited, jerky, the backgrounds were angular Art Deco, and the music was this sparse, echoic electronic score.
Completely unlike Scott Bradley's work.
Utterly. And the characters changed too. Mammy Two Shoes was replaced by a new owner.
A bald, overweight, short-tempered white man.
Yes, and this new owner was, as the sources describe him, significantly more brutal and violent toward Tom than Mammy had ever been. He would physically thrash the cat, and audiences found this escalated, more realistic violence really unsettling.
But despite the low critical reception commercially, they were a huge success.
That's the paradox. In 1962, the Tom and Jerry series, buoyed by these new shorts, became the highest-grossing animated short film series in the world. It actually dethroned Looney Tunes.
But none of the Deitch shorts got an Oscar nomination.
Not one.
After that era ended, MGM revived the franchise one last time for its theatrical run, bringing in another animation giant, Chuck Jones.
This was the Chuck Jones era, from 63 to 67. Jones, the legend behind Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, produced 34 more shorts.
You would think that's a perfect fit, but the sources indicate he actually struggled to adapt his style.
He did. Jones' style often relied on anticipation, the emotional performance leading up to the gag. Tom and Jerry was always more about non-stop mechanical action. Jones's shorts tended to favor personality and style over storyline.
What elements of his style did make it in?
His trademarks, like his blackout gags where the scene suddenly cuts to black to emphasize a punchline, and lots of gags involving characters falling from great heights, just like in his Roadrunner work.
And we see one final character redesign during this period.
Yes. Tom got thicker eyebrows, very similar to Jones's Grinch. Jerry got much larger eyes and ears, a lighter brown color. This run concluded the original theatrical short series in 1967.
So the journey of Tom and Jerry through the 60s brought changes in style, but it also forced a serious confrontation with one of the franchise's biggest historical issues, racial stereotypes and the need for censorship.
This is a complex and necessary discussion. Like many cartoons from the 1930s to the 50s, Tom and Jerry included overt racial stereotypes. The most common was the blackface gag after an explosion.
We have to acknowledge that these scenes are examples of inherited historical prejudice, and they are frequently cut from modern broadcasts.
They are, but the central controversy revolved around the housekeeper, Mammy Two Shoes. She was portrayed as a heavy-set, middle-aged black woman, usually only seen from the torso down.
And she embodied the mammy archetype.
Exactly. A stereotype that groups like the NAACP had been protesting as racist since the 1940s.
So, as the shorts became permanent fixtures on television and home video, the attempts to deal with this problematic content accelerated.
They tried multiple strategies. In the 60s, the Chuck Jones team was tasked with physically editing the Hanna-Barbera originals. They would reanimate entire sections to replace Mammy Two Shoes.
So they just erased the character and replaced her.
They replaced her with a fat white Irish woman or a thin white teenager, with both roles voiced by June Foray. Later, under Turner ownership in the mid-90s, they tried a different approach. They redubbed Mammy's dialogue entirely.
To remove the stereotypical jargon?
Right. They hired the actress Thea Vidal to provide new voice work, even if the original visual stereotype remained.
And in more recent years, the approach has been to include explicit warnings.
This happened with the 2005 DVD releases. A very clear disclaimer was featured, read by Whoopi Goldberg, stating that the prejudices depicted were wrong then and they are wrong today.
And the rationale for including the unedited versions was also stated.
The intention, as the disclaimer reads, was to present them as they were originally created, because to do otherwise would be the same as claiming that these prejudices never existed. It's a commitment to acknowledging the full, uncomfortable historical context.
And the censorship didn't stop with Mammy Two Shoes. Other shorts were edited or removed for various reasons.
We see this extending beyond race. Shorts like His Mouse Friday, which depicts cannibals in a highly offensive way, or Casanova Cat, which has a blackface minstrel dance, have been heavily edited or removed from circulation.
Even non-racial content has been edited, especially for kids.
That's right. Since 2020, episodes like The Two Mouseketeers with its guillotine reference and The Dark Blue Cat Blues with its themes of alcoholism and suicide are largely removed from platforms like Cartoon Network. The current standard for children just deems these themes inappropriate.
Despite all these complex issues, the franchise moved forward, transitioning into the very medium that had ended the golden era television.
This was solidified when Ted Turner acquired MGM's film library in 1986. Tom and Jerry became the property of Turner Entertainment, which is now part of Warner Bros. This provided the stability for numerous TV iterations.
The first major attempt to reinvent them for TV saw the original creators, Hanna and Barbera, return in 1975 for The Tom and Jerry Show.
This was a radical departure. Due to stringent rules against violence for children's TV in the 70s, Tom and Jerry were recast as nonviolent friends who went on adventures together.
That sounds wrong.
The format abandoned the central premise. It was unique to that series and was not repeated.
That was quickly followed by the Filmation era in the early 80s, the Tom and Jerry comedy show.
Filmation returned to the original chase formula, probably in response to the poor reception of the nonviolent concept, but it was generally seen as less polished than the originals and had a brief run.
Then, following the 80s and 90s trend, we got the inevitable babyfication of the duo with Tom and Jerry kids.
This ran from 1990 to 1994. It featured youthful versions of Tom and Jerry, but the most significant development was in the backup segments with Spike and Tyke. This is the first time audiences ever heard the puppy, Tyke, speak.
Giving him a personality for the first time.
Exactly.
By the 2000s, the franchise finally returned to its roots stylistically.
That began with Tom and Jerry Tales from 2006 to 2008. This series consciously used the original character designs and focused on the classic slapstick, marking a return to form. Technically, it was the first series in widescreen 16.9.
And that classic approach continued with the Tom and Jerry Show, which had a long run from 2014 to 2021.
That series maintained the core sensibility, but expanded the settings. The characters were placed in contemporary homes, but also medieval castles or mad scientist labs, just keeping the central conflict but updating the environment.
And the franchise continues to show its global adaptability with recent geographically specific productions.
The minimal dialogue made it perfect for export. We now have Singapore-set animated shorts from 2023 and the ongoing Japanese Tom and Jerry Goko series.
And beyond TV, they've had a significant presence in feature films, starting early on with live-action crossovers.
Their earliest film appearances were cameos in MGM musicals. Most famously, Jerry performed a dance number with Gene Kelly in the 1945 film Anchors Aweigh.
A huge piece of cinema history.
It is. They also swam with Esther Williams in Dangerous When Wet. Their first dedicated feature film, however, came much later.
Tom and Jerry, the movie in 1992.
And that film is notable because it's the only installment where the duo regularly speaks.
Hmm.
This choice proved unpopular, with many feeling it diminished the universal visual nature of their humor.
More recently, we saw the 2021 live-action hybrid film, and we should also note that Joseph Barbera's creative influence continued right up until his death.
His last project was the direct-to-video film A Nutcracker Tale from 2007, based on an initial story idea by him. The film was dedicated to him posthumously.
The longevity of his franchise, surviving over 8 decades and countless changes, brings us to its truly massive cultural and global influence.
The brilliance was the limited dialogue. That single factor made the slapstick universal, easily translatable, and popular globally. The title itself became a cultural shorthand for any never-ending rivalry.
And we see fascinating examples of this, particularly in markets outside the West, like Japan.
Japan's reverence for animation is immense. In a 2005 nationwide survey, Tom and Jerry ranked number 58 on a list of the top 100 anime, and it was the only non-Japanese animation to make that list, beating several Japanese classics.
That speaks volumes about its cultural assimilation, and in China, the show played a huge historical role.
It was one of the few Western cartoons aired by China's Central Television in the mid-80s and early 90s. It was extremely popular and foundational for that generation.
The United Kingdom also had a unique relationship with the show.
The BBC often used the shorts, unedited for violence, as a tactical schedule filler from 1967 to 2001, if a live broadcast overran or if there was an unforeseen disruption.
The sources cite a 1993 IRA bomb scare.
Exactly. The BBC would immediately turn to a Tom and Jerry short to bridge the gap. They knew the visual format would instantly grab and retain an audience.
And historically, the show reached audiences in parts of Eastern Europe before the Iron Curtain fell.
That's a key point. The shorts were some of the very few Western cartoons broadcast in places like Czechoslovakia and Romania before 1989, making them a rare window into Western popular culture.
And beyond its reach, Tom and Jerry directly influenced other media, particularly animation and comedy.
The influence is profound. You see it most directly in The Simpsons cartoon within a cartoon, The Itchy and Scratchy Show, which pushes the violence to absurd extremes, commenting directly on the original's mayhem.
And that influence extends internationally.
Yes, the French cartoon Augie and the Cockroaches drew its primary influence from Tom and Jerry's silent comedy and slapstick structure.
We also see the influence extending into video games.
A powerful connection. Toru Iwatani, the creator of Pac-Man, explicitly stated that the back-and-forth chase dynamic between Pac-Man and the Ghosts was directly inspired by the constant pursuit and reversal of fortune in Tom and Jerry.
And then there's the unexpected inspiration for real-world antics.
Johnny Knoxville of Jackass noted that watching the sheer ridiculous inventiveness of the cartoon violence was a direct inspiration for many of their stunts. The ability to endure constant injury and just reset for the next gag.
Finally, we turn to something far more serious. The adoption of the simple rivalry as a geopolitical metaphor.
This is perhaps the most powerful testament to their dynamic. The supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, once publicly likened the rivalry between the U.S. and Iran to Tom and Jerry. He cast the U.S. as the frustrated cat and Iran as the persistent mouse.
And there is a poignant note regarding the late Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat.
Arafat greatly admired the show because he felt the mouse always managed to outwit the cat. For him, this mirrored how Palestinians, viewed as the underdog, managed to persist despite facing powerful adversity. It shows how the simple narrative transcends entertainment and enters the realm of political identity.
That truly emphasizes the universal power of this narrative. We've covered a massive amount of ground today, from its accidental birth through the peak of MGM innovation, the difficult budget-driven years, the issues of censorship, and its eventual global dominance.
And throughout all those changes, the one constant is the fundamental, often silent, visual relationship between that cat and that mouse. They need each other, and the audience understands that, regardless of language or era.
Which brings us to a final reflection for you, the listener. Considering the multiple creative teams, the decades of required stylistic and character overhauls, and the massive social expectations that necessitated these changes, what single element of the Tom and Jerry relationship, whether the pioneering music, the lack of dialogue, or just the raw visual language of slapstick, remains the true unchanging constant that allows this rivalry to continually resonate with new audiences, generation after generation?
It's a compelling question. It speaks directly to the enduring power of visual, universal storytelling.
Thank you for taking the time to explore this history with us.
A pleasure.
Thanks for listening.